Welcome to the Cup of Tea podcast series, organised within the Intercultural Approach programme of the Directorate General International Partnership of the European Commission. We hope to bring you a moment of intercultural empowerment through stories, conversations, witty repartee and debate. Guest speakers from public and private bodies will join us to share their insights and intercultural experiences at work and in everyday life. Stay tuned. We hope you enjoy it. Marco Blankenberg really is an international citizen. Originally from the Netherlands, his fascination with global work and culture has led him to work in over 70 countries. In 2001, he started Knowledge Works in order to better equip international workers with intercultural intelligence and has created some incredibly useful methodology, drawing from more than 28 years of intercultural work and experience. We're really excited to have Marco join us today and share some insights on intercultural intelligence, cross-cultural skills, and so much more. So Marco, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's a delight to be here, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
Marco, one of the things that I know and love about you is that you're a storyteller, as am I. And so I thought we'd dive right in by getting into, probably a bit of your backstory. So maybe to help introduce yourself and get everything going, maybe you could tell us just a little bit about what drew you into the field of intercultural understanding. Where did you get your start? What fascinated you about it?
Well, my start was very, very young in an unexpected place, in a very monocultural village in the Netherlands, with 1,100 people, and we were in a very small village school. And a family from the UK moved into our village, and their dad was going to work at the lumber mill, and his two sons were thrown into the local village school. And I made it my mission to learn English. I was 8 years old. So I went to the loft and found my dad's Second World War musty, brown paper covered English books and started to teach myself English. And automatically I became their friend because I was the only kid at such a young age that actually could speak English. And that was my first exposure to reaching out to people who were different from me and who in this case also spoke a very different language. The boys didn't last. I think culture shock got the better of them and they moved back to the UK. But it left a lasting impression on me and a desire to keep reaching out to the intriguing unknown. Let me put it that way.
It's a really good phrase, the intriguing unknown, and it's really impressive that at such an early age you took it upon yourself. I can't think of many 8-year-olds who would just decide, you know what, I'm going to learn another language. I'm just going to go do it at 8 years old. But obviously, you probably did make a huge difference to those boys. That ability to reach out to someone who's different than you. I think that underpins so much of what we talk about in the intercultural world. Well, I want to draw on that fascination that you have with the great unknown, because in some of our chats you've brought up absolutely fascinating concepts and things that I think are really helpful in an ever globalizing world. One concept in particular that I've heard you speak of is the idea of perception management. And I have to say, perception management, when you first hear it, that sounds like some sort of public relation, some sort of PR thing that famous people do. But there's actually so much more to it. So would you mind walking us through that a bit? What exactly is perception management, and how can it be useful in a professional sense?
Yeah, thank you for raising that issue. It's not a brand equity or persona creation phrase, although it could be seen that way. It could be perceived that way. What we are talking about is how we perceive ourselves, others, relationships, the place where those relationships are trying to happen in a intercultural context. So how do I culturally perceive myself, the other, the relationship, and the context? That's what we're talking about. And what we find time and time again, those our perceptions are formed lightning fast. Our brain relies heavily on previous memories. And those previous memories get clubbed together with our current experience, and that causes us to perceive the other person, ourselves, in a certain way. And we don't spend enough time recalibrating that, thinking deeply about how do I feel right now, what's happening in my mind, what causes me to draw conclusions about this other person, or in which way the relationship is going splendidly well or is going in a disastrous direction. So I think it's one of the most underserved areas of people development. And in our intercultural world, we really need to start taking it serious.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. I think even hearing you explain that, it made me think of the concept of fast thinking and slow thinking. Basically, that
Yes.
we
Yeah.
really are we're so programmed for pattern recognition,
Hmm.
which saves us a load of time. I mean, if we didn't have pattern recognition, everything would be exhausting to have to think about critically. So we relegate a load of things to pattern recognition. But it sounds like perhaps some of what perception management is learning to discern what's okay in pattern recognition and maybe what needs to be drawn out and actually critically thought about. And at the risk of being really presumptuous, I think in general, it's probably worth noting people probably need critical thinking when it comes to dealing with other people, that we run into trouble when we put people into pattern recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. Our brain would probably overload and overheat indeed if we didn't have that mechanism of drawing conclusions quickly on the ordinary stuff in life. But when it comes to the complexity of interculturally connecting, collaborating, negotiating, resolving conflict, we need to be much more mindful of ourselves and the other people and what's trying to happen. And that, indeed, thinking fast and slow, you really need to start to slow down first before you can speed up again. I've seen this over and over again where we get into a situation and we already start to draw conclusions about the other person in the room just because of the way they speak English or some other language, or just because of their mannerism, or just because of the color of their skin. There's been research done that if you meet a person who, let's say that the conversation is in English, but the person doesn't speak English the same way you do, automatically, the further their dialect is removed from your dialect, your inclination to trust what they're going to say goes down. And that's just one facet of perception management. I was meeting with a gentleman who works with one of our clients, and he was in a very different cultural context, had a very different way of speaking English. His color of skin was different than most of his colleagues. And he was in a senior leadership position, and he was asked to present a new plan. And it was a brilliant plan. He presented it 5 times in front of the group. It was rejected. And then he said, "This can't be. This is a great idea." And then he decided to do something radical. The 6th time he presented it, he stood in the back of the room so people couldn't see him. And they were only looking at the compelling business case of his idea. And they accepted it. And it was a
Wow.
classical situation where the package that he brought into the room, if he would stand in front of the room, his packaging was not received well. His idea was therefore thrown out. And it's very, very sad, but it's also, as you said, it's just our brain is wired to draw conclusions really quickly.
I think that sort of begs the question then, what are some things that we can do about that? Because that story you just shared is such a great example of the fact that if we allow ourselves to run too much on pattern recognition, and if we are sort of wired to be less trusting of things that are different, to me it's really interesting that even the same language, just a difference in dialect will trigger that degree of sort of wariness. So if that is the case, and we don't want to miss out on amazing content that might just not be in a package that we readily recognize, what are some things that we can do? How can we improve and really focus on perception management?
Yeah, we have a number of tools. They're all really simple tools. When you look at them from a cognitive theoretical point of view, they're no-brainers. But adding them all up, it allows you to sort of start to reprogram your mind in the way you engage, in the way you're present in a situation. So one of the tools we use is it's again really easy to remember. It's called the DIR, and what it tries to do, you mentioned fast and slow, thinking fast and slow. It tries to slow you down. So
Hmm.
DIR stands for describe, interpret, and then respond. And what we're looking for is how you feel about what just happened, or the decision that was made, or the interpretation or conclusion that was drawn. So learning to separate, especially if you have a conversation with other people, it's especially important when you're dealing with a conflict situation where things can get really emotive very fast, especially if it's
Hmm.
intercultural. So learning to separate describing the situation from interpreting the situation, and then adding to that, once you've agreed on an interpretation, drawn a conclusion, or made a decision, adding to that an emotional response. And it is super difficult for people. People, you know, they will always mix up description and interpretation. They will say, well, this was a gentleman with a harsh looking face. You know, that's a classical
Hmm.
mixing description and interpretation. If they on top of that say, this is a gentleman with a harsh looking face, and I don't know if I can trust him. So then I'm starting to emotionally connect weight to that interpretation. That harsh looking face must be untrustworthy. And very often, if you really keep an eye on yourself, so to speak, we often do that. We mix description and interpretation, and then we emotionally respond to it. And then we get
Hmm.
stuck in ridiculous dialogues, or very contentious dialogues that really don't go anywhere. So learning to create room also for other people, especially if you need to create a solution together, if you need to negotiate or resolve a conflict, can you learn to separate really describing the situation from then saying, okay, what do we collectively think was going on here? The interpretation, the conclusion. But then also inviting people to say, well, how do you actually feel about that situation? Or how do you feel about the decision we just made? Are you excited about it? Are
Hmm.
you suspicious? Are you sad that we made this decision? So that's one of our perception management tools. And the easiest way to start using it is reflecting on what just happened. So you might have just had a miserable meeting or a fantastic meeting, and using describe, interpret, respond as a reflection method. Say, can I pull it apart? Could I have held my tongue a little bit longer and allowed the other person to speak before I said, well, of course, this is what we need to do, or of course, that's what happened. So reflecting after the fact initially, and then starting to practice it in real life.
Which it makes so much sense, really, and I like the way you described it. That in essence, it really is just trying to slow us down a bit, and it's being able to separate out our own feelings and emotions from cold hard facts. And as we said, I think that's hard to do because we are looking for patterns. We are looking to most efficiently connect emotions and thoughts and everything else, and that actually being able to separate those out, there can be great benefit to that.
Mm.
Which leads me to ask, really, intercultural understanding requires a bit of a slowdown. It requires almost moving less efficiently. So would you say that that's maybe the cost of intercultural understanding, or what would you say is the cost of intercultural understanding, and do the benefits from that intercultural understanding, do they outweigh the cost? You know, if we're wired for efficiency, and what we're saying is intercultural intelligence actually means having to purposefully slow down, are the benefits worth that reduction in efficiency?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you're asking me, so I'm biased when it
Yeah,
comes to the answer to this question. Uh,
surely not. Surely not.
but I would say at the deeper level, the cost is really quite profound, I would say, in that, we all like to be seen as objective human beings. And we all like to think that we have a clear view of the situation. And the first thing that I had to learn is just to practice humility, and that I have just one perspective. My perception of the situation is just one of many. And yes, I might have some ideas about what's going on here or how to resolve it or which direction we should go. But ultimately, it requires humility to start developing intercultural understanding. It requires me to say, I might not be as objective as I think I am because there is
Mm.
20 other people in the room who are from very different backgrounds and who have very different cultural stories that they're bringing into the room. I need to create space for them. And I think that's for some people they just can't do that. Um,
Mm.
I believe when once you do, it is super exciting because you're continuously learning, you're continuously picking up on new ways of thinking, new ways of seeing situations, and to me, that's been. I said to one of my colleagues, I said, I think I'm addicted to this stuff. It's so intriguing. You're learning so much from people from all around the world that the benefit, well, if you look at the research, there is a significant benefit. Diverse teams who figure it out, they typically, if you have like a diverse team that includes cultural diversity as well as gender diversity, they can make up to 87% better decisions than teams who don't
Wow.
figure it out. It's significant. Um, and they make decisions faster because they create room for ideas. And those ideas come from different cultural lenses. And that creates much more innovation and creativity on those teams. And when you look at that, decision making is actually a huge part, no matter if you're in the NGO or in the corporate sector or in the government, decision making effectiveness is directly linked to performance, and it's up to 95%. So
Wow.
if you make your decision making better, more creative, more innovative, more inclusive, it directly links to whatever performance indicators you might have in place.
Wow. And those are significant numbers as well.
Yes, yeah, that's from
That's
McKinsey has done a lot of research on that. Forbes magazine has published on it. Um, so yeah, it's compelling. When you look at good performing, healthy performing, diverse teams, when you look at other teams in their same sector of society, there's a difference of about 35% in performance.
wow. That really is. I mean, as far as compelling reasons to, to decide that it is worth the cost, that perhaps it does require a bit more thinking. Well, and it requires humility. I think I'm really glad you brought that up because that is a hard stumbling block for a lot of people, especially because I think in the world right now we're almost taught to broadcast more confidence than we might have, and so in some ways it's really interesting to hear that actually moving in the other direction in appropriate ways, that by demonstrating humility,
Mm.
you're actually creating space to vastly improve your decision making, to vastly improve the creativity and everything that comes out of it. In some ways, that sort of flies in the face of perhaps what we've been taught through social media and personal broadcasting and all that sort of thing. There's a phrase that you've used that I've really enjoyed because it's a short, simple phrase, but it's a really good reminder, perhaps, of that need for humility. You've basically said that it's worth remembering that each person is uniquely wired culturally, and that even though we do want to pattern recognize, and we'll do it on so many different levels, we want to lock people together based on their nationality, based on their language, based on all sorts of things, but that actually, bearing in mind just that everyone is uniquely wired culturally, individually, how practically can we avoid relying on generalities or even, I mean, I've heard the phrase country averages,
Mhm. Yeah.
at a national level, just deciding all Germans are this way and all Portuguese are this way and all Dutch are this way. How can we avoid those sort of generalities?
Well, it's very sad actually that we still have to raise this issue in the world that we live in, with close to 300 million people not living in the country of their passport, with a few hundred million that are considered TCKs, third culture kids, or CCKs, cross cultural kids, and with according to the the Global Labor Organization, about a third of and all 3.4 billion employees around the world are in some way or another interculturally engaged. Despite
Wow.
that, we still insist that the best way to become closer to each other culturally is through these country averages.
Mm.
And when we started looking at that now 20 years ago, that was with our team in Dubai, we realized those country averages were actually, in many cases, dangerous. It's like
Mm.
the average Indian. Well, then all of a sudden, the rapper might look Indian, but then you discover that, he's a third generation who has lived for three generations in Dubai, or, so
Right.
there's so many people in the world today that where those country averages don't apply. The first mistake I made was where I met a local gentleman who owned a large business. The first time he met me was with a cap backwards on his head and a t-shirt and jeans. And he told me that he lived in the US for 17 years, married an American wife. And I thought, oh, good, American, put him in the box. So I'm going to deal with him as an American. The next time I meet him, he was dressed like a Gulf national, a white robe
Hmm.
and the rutra on his head. And I thought, I made a major mistake here. I put him in a box where he doesn't belong, and I need to, backtrack and mend the relationship as a result of that. So coming to the realization that we are all unique culturally. We are all on a unique journey. We've been influenced by different people, different cultural preferences, significant people in our lives, either in the religious establishment, in education, through friends, family, etc., etc. We're all on a unique journey. And if we realize that, it changes our mindset when we engage with one another. Because if I hold on to that truth and I step into the next meeting, I force my mind to not rely on the outside wrapper. And
Mm.
I say, you are a unique cultural human being. What does that mean in terms of the type of questions I need to ask you? Uh, what would it mean for getting to know each other deeply? And we've asked this question now, to thousands of people all around the world. And when we present this idea, people come alive. They get really excited.
Mm.
They said, wow, this could be the solution to diminish the impact of unconscious biases and stereotypes. And this could really create much deeper connection with one another. We desperately need that after the time with COVID, especially. We want to connect as human
Mm.
beings. But we can hang up on those country or ethnic, or if you're in North America, race-related stereotypes. And what it does really, it doesn't put the relationship at the center. That's probably one of the most
Mm.
profound things. If you are a uniquely wired cultural human being, it pushes me to want to get to know you. And that requires me to ask questions, to spend time with you. And that puts relationship at the center. And very often, ethnic labels, race-related labels, um, puts an emotive label on the other person, and it stops us
Mm.
from deeply connecting with one another.
I really love that you brought up the importance of relationship and the importance of connection. I mean, one topic that I speak about as often as humanly possible is the idea of empathy, and
Mm,
I think that
mm,
ties in so very well with that. That really, if we're going to open the channels to be able to empathize with other people, that does require being able to look at them as uniquely wired cultural individuals rather than lopping them in to bigger categories. For that empathetic connection to happen, we have to be able to see people as
absolutely.
unique
Yeah.
individuals.
Yeah. And
Um,
what the dilemma we sit with then, so if you move away from country averages, then people say, well, you're making it a whole lot more complicated now. So, everybody's unique. Okay, how do I figure out who they are? So what we did is we developed a language that helps you. In Dutch, we talk about coat hangers. So they're sort of the
hmm,
cultural coat hangers that you can connect, like you can use as a way to figure each other out, so to speak. And there's a number of tools that we developed, but one of the tools that makes it maybe more practical is called the three colors of worldview. And the three colors of worldview is in and of itself a neutral tool. So it's not saying, oh, you're just doing that because you're Dutch, or, that, which is not very helpful for the relationship. But to have another language to talk about human behavior, the cultural side of human behavior, is really, really helpful. It takes the emotional sting out of it. So the three colors of worldview is a really simple tool. It talks about three cultural drivers that are typically present in every human being. And typically one of those drivers is the stronger driver. And briefly, the one driver talks about pursuing the right thing to do, avoid doing the wrong thing. Another driver talks about pursuing that which is honorable and avoiding shame. And the third driver is talking about pursuing that which gives me position in the hierarchy, gives me influence, power, and avoiding being in compromising situations that might be ambiguous or that might cause even fear in my life. So doing the right thing, doing the honorable thing, doing that which gives me influence, position, power. So what we find around the world, that people really resonate with that simple idea, and using that language to then start to connect with one another and saying, well, like in my case, I was raised in a small village in the Netherlands. Doing the right thing, avoid doing the wrong thing, was the main driver, but it was also a small village where everybody knew what everybody else was doing. So honor, avoiding shame, the honor of the family, the honor of the family business was very, very important, and avoiding some form of shame. And when there was a threat from the outside, if I, for instance, listened to the stories of my grandfather from the 1940s, then power versus fear came into the equation. And many of those stories were actually alluding to this idea that if somebody else tries to overpower us, how do we respond to that? And in my grandfather's situation, that meant that he felt called to join the resistance, for instance. And a lot of his stories were about the power clash between different ideologies and different ways of looking at life. So those are the three that we play with, and they're very helpful to help people sort of take apart what is culturally trying to happen here. And we use that as a baseline to put a language around the fact that we're all uniquely wired cultural human beings.
I like how you pointed out that actually we do have a mix of all of those, and that in different circumstances, different ones might take precedence, as you mentioned in your stories. In a practical sense, I think we'd all agree there's a lot going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
Whether it's at a government level or relational or individual or organizational, all of us have to do some conflict resolution and some negotiation. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on, maybe what's the difference between just regular negotiation and what would step it up to turn it into intercultural negotiation? What would happen if we applied things like this three color of worldview, if we applied that to the way we negotiate things, and maybe brought an intercultural edge into it? Is that feasible? Is that something that you see as being useful?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because in the world of today, the average manager leader spends about 35% of their time negotiating all kinds of stuff, small decisions to very big, large project related negotiations. And very often, negotiation can have conflict on the edges as well. So learning to navigate that and see how far you can go, there's a huge difference. When I look at any courses that are being offered on negotiation, they still, sorry to say, but they still smell very transactional. It's about the outcome. And the other people at the other end of the table are a vehicle to achieve that outcome. What we're trying to do with intercultural negotiation is to balance it out, where, yes, the transactional piece is important. One of our pillars is doing your homework really well, preparing really well, doing some modeling and financial modeling, stakeholder analysis, study the people that will be part in the process, anything you can find on them. That's sort of the transactional side. But the relational side is equally important and sometimes overlooked. And unfortunately, especially in the average negotiation training program, the relational side is overlooked. And on the relational side, you have sort of three components. You have the sort of psychology of it. So, who is the personality on the other side of the table? And are they only interested in the bottom line? Are they interested in big spreadsheets and nitty gritty details? And or are they more averse to making a decision and they want to stall the process, or do they want to make a decision right here and right now? So the different personalities and learning to read those really fast is part of the process, and that's not exclusively true for intercultural negotiation. That's true for any negotiation, even at the dinner table in our family.
Right.
But the people side, there's the personality side, there's the emotional intelligence side, my self-awareness, self-motivation, self-regulation. Is incredibly important. We often use emotional intelligence as a baseline for developing cultural agility, intercultural intelligence. So, what is emotionally happening in this negotiation? Can I see the early signs of people getting agitated? Can I see the early signs of people getting excited or warming up to my idea? Can I sense triggers in myself, especially triggers of insecurity, for instance, or getting agitated, getting upset with the other party? So being emotionally intelligent is the second ingredient on the people side. And the third one is then the intercultural piece. To be honest, I've not seen very, very many courses that even highlight that we are cultural human beings at the negotiation table, and that cultural human being is going to show up, especially if you start squeezing the negotiation and
Yeah.
learning to recognize what that looks like. For instance, using tools like the DIR. If people get emotive, they are sitting on their emotional response. Can you diffuse that and can you bring them back to, okay, help me understand again how you see this situation? Go back to the description and then see if you can together come to a new conclusion. We have we call it the litmus test for the three colors of worldview. So when I say something in a negotiation, can I craft it in such a way that it's likely to do right by the other party, it's likely to honor the other party, and it's likely to be received as empowering or life-giving to the other party? And of course, that approach assumes that I'm looking for a win-win, that I'm looking for a long-term relationship with the other party. But that litmus test is probably one of the easiest ways to start to become better at interculturally negotiating. So if you don't know anything about who the other party is, who they are as cultural human beings, at least try and craft your engagement with saying, I'm trying to do right by them, I'm trying to honor them, I'm trying to be empowering. We use the phrase life-giving to them. And so in that way, I think learning to interculturally negotiate is a a step up. It's like a next level of doing it better.
What a great outlook to be able to turn things toward a win-win, to look at in this negotiation, how can I appeal to doing what is right, doing what is honorable, and doing what is empowering. I think those are great steps forward. So maybe I want to close us off with your thoughts on the future. What do you think the future holds? What's hopeful for you as you work so hard to get this out into the world?
Well, it's very easy to look at a glass half empty, half full. I like to look at it half full. There's a lot of stuff happening in this world, but I also have the privilege of hearing many stories from our network. We call people who've been certified by us intercultural practitioners, and we have hundreds of them all over the world. And I hear so many cool stories of what they're doing with cultural agility, with intercultural intelligence, and that gives me hope. All the way from marriage relationships that get enriched, the work, Chris, that you're involved with third culture kids, neighborhoods being uplifted through bringing cultural agility into neighborhoods. We just had a beautiful project like that with youth engagement in North America. We've seen tribal reconciliation happen by using these tools in post-war situations. And I keep on hearing those stories, and I think, yes, there is hope. If we learn to come to the table in humility, if we get tooled up a little bit more to be more focused on the relationship initially and less on the transaction, I think there's definitely hope in our world.
Well, Marco, we're sincerely grateful for your willingness to be with us and to share what you've learned, what you teach, and what I think are some really valuable insights into skills that are worth investing in personally and professionally in an ever-globalizing world. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you. This was a delight, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you, Chris.
My pleasure. Feel free to check out other resources, initiatives, and projects put together by the INCA programme, designed to provide intercultural reflections with new modalities and tools to enhance the relevance and the impact of EU programmes and projects. For more information or to hear more, visit www.capacity4dev.eu and check out the INCA programme's learning and sharing community groups.